Good evening. Noting the time and the presence of a quorum, I'll bring this December 12th, 2024 meeting of the Department of Public Works Building Committee to order. Our first piece of business is to review and approve the minutes from the previous meeting. I should have made note of this. Before, when I first started the meeting. We do have a new member on the committee, Greg Jarbo, is the designee from the Finance Committee. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you.
Should be a very exciting project. Greg brings a lot of...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would defer to Weston and Sampson if John and Della, who are here representing Weston and Sampson, as well as Kevin from PMA, if you wanted to come on up, we'll bring the presentation up, and we're excited to hear what you have in store for us. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Tom, and thanks, members of the Building Committee. The last time we met, we had just received the cost estimates, and since that time, we've been working to kind of identify cost-saving measures. So we've put together a presentation tonight just to give an overview of what we've been looking at. Next slide, please. So the agenda is we're looking at the cost-saving efforts, the funding opportunities that are also available. We've also put some renderings together, views of the proposed building from Forest Road and from within the site, and then the next steps of the project. Next slide, please. So when we presented and we put together our schematic design cost estimate, we were going with phase construction. This plan illustration shows the original intent of that, approach. And next slide, please.
There's a few animations that show kind of the complexity of that phasing approach. So first phase demo, come in to complete the building, compared to what we're pivoting to with off-site temporary facilities.
Right, so thank you, Della. The phasing itself will, we feel, do a number of things. It's going to reduce the cost of the site development cost, a lot of excavation into the bank between Forest Road and the existing building. It will also reduce the construction schedule, which is a big cost saver, maybe from about 2 years down to about 1.5 years. So there's a lot of savings there. General conditions. There's also work associated with setting up temporary facilities on the site. So there's savings to be realized there. We think plus or minus $1.6 million. Next slide, please. Yes.
I like the fact that you're thinking of doing it all at once. You have a 1.6 million savings. Does that also include renting sites someplace else or not?
So there was costs in the soft costs for renting trailers.
Yeah.
I think we had $350,000 in there. We also had moving costs at $75,000. So if we rent, or the town rents, those costs would get moved to rental of a new
So
building.
about $400,000, you're saying approximately?
Yes.
Good.
So we think that the soft cost could be a wash, or maybe even a savings, depending on what the rent might be.
Okay, thank you.
There would also be costs with fitting out those spaces for fleet maintenance operations. So there would be some cost with that. Yeah. Next slide, please. So this is, I think this is the same one, or no? This is the completed.
This animation just shows if we can avoid phasing around an existing building, we can slide that footprint away from Forest Road and slightly angle it. So you can see in this graphic, the kind of translucent is the former footprint, and we're proposing by pulling away from that buffer, we can reduce some of that site work where we have to excavate and flatten out the site. So that's where a lot of the costs are realized, by pulling away from that natural buffer. That's it for animations until the last slide.
All right, the rest of the slides are pretty boring until the end. So these are other kind of scope reductions or value engineering items that we identified. The biggest one is we feel, and we mentioned, I think last time, that we can reduce the number of geothermal wells that we included in the schematic design estimate. These wells they go down 400, 500 feet. They're based on the BTU requirement, and I think we have 50,000 BTUs roughly estimated now that we're going to need. We feel that we can get this down, but we're conservative at the beginning, so we feel there's some savings there, maybe 800,000. Other items, reduce the masonry base around the building, and this is the exterior veneer CMU base, not the durable kind of interior concrete wall that would protect the building from trucks and plows. Reduce the overall limits of paving, maybe 100,000 plus or minus there. I should say that all of these are ideas that haven't yet been agreed to by the board or by the DPW. So we want to, after this presentation, run through a spreadsheet and get the board, the committee's opinion on each of these and whether or not we should pursue them. And you'll see at the end. Reduce the extent of, so the knockdown pad, it'd be, instead of a poured concrete, it'd be heavy-duty asphalt. There'd be some savings there. Reduce the extent of the mezzanine area by 10%, plus or minus 145,000. Reduce skylights by 50%. That's only 30,000. I'm not sure what happened there, but that should be 30,000, not 145,000. And next slide, please. We identified some work that might be performed by the town. These are items that would be done before or after construction, so as not to interfere with kind of the construction contracted work. So final paving, which would be the final maybe 2 inches of asphalt at the end of the project for 290,000. Final landscaping, 250,000. Site clearing at the beginning of, prior to construction, that's removal of trees, 40,000. And maybe 20% of the rough site excavation, that'd be $100,000. Another item that we thought could either be done by the town or included as a bid alternate is the supply and installation of bulk material storage bins, plus or minus $250,000. Next slide, please. And these are bid alternate items. These are items that you could easily, not easily, but you could easily add back into the project. So if the bids come in favorably, you can say, oh, well, you know, and you have extra money in the budget, you could add these items back in order of preference, and you have to order these items. So new canopy structure off the salt shed is $320,000. Fit out of the wash bay, that would be finishes and equipment, $568,000. Purchase and installation of bridge cranes in the shop areas, there are 3 of them, $120,000. And build sound barrier walls, plus or minus $880,000. Next slide, please. So go ahead. Sorry, I thought you were. No problem. The PMA presented a total project cost at the schematic design level. We had a total project cost of $46,960,456 with a construction cost of $37,946,168. We need to get an 18.
Project, and then it could be somewhere between 6 to 30% of that cost. You can maximize that by doing prevailing wages and apprenticeship program, just some things to consider. There's the SMART program for solar, another incentive program. Green Communities, that's a grant program, so that would allow funding a grant upfront, which could help fund the project from the beginning instead of post-occupancy. And Acton is a designated green community. climate leader is a step further. And I believe the town is already well on their way in that direction. There's a handful of requirements, climate action plan, fossil fuel-free bylaw, a lot of things that Acton are already looking into and implementing. So that has a significantly larger grant opportunity. And then recently Corey mentioned the Chapter 90 program. That's not necessarily funding for sustainable initiatives. It's more through Mass DOT for improvements to public ways. So eligible projects include salt storage, fleet storage. So we've been looking into that as well to see what we could maybe pull from that annual funding lump sum to maybe redirect toward portions of this project. Next slide.
Maybe go back to the other slide, I'm sorry. These are all post-construction?
The Mass Save is post-construction.
Yeah,
The IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, those tax credits are post-construction. The last three are grants. You have to go through an application process, but the idea would be you would time it out where you would get the funds to go into the project. So those are not post-occupancy.
thank you.
Following question? Yeah.
Does this assume that with the administration change January 21st in DC, that all of these funds are still going to be available?
There is a disclaimer there. The IRA is definitely under a magnifying glass to see how they may change. The state level, I don't anticipate Massachusetts to change.
Well, I was at a meeting this morning down in Foxborough of the Route 495 Metro West Economic Development Committees, and one of the speakers was the vice chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, and she indicated that revenue is not coming in as expected on the state level. So if we're going to use these as, possible funding opportunities, it would be important to know what's there and what we hope will be there, which may be different.
It's true.
So the Mass Save program is a utility-based program. We expect that to still be there. And that's the only funding that we're including right now. The other ones are to be determined.
So Corey will be writing the grants, or you will be writing the grants with Corey, or,
We'll be working together. for
Yeah.
that. Yes.
okay.
Typically, there's 2 rolling submission dates. Green communities, there's 2 submission dates, and it is an application process. Essentially, my understanding is you justify why this project deserves a grant. And there's a handful of reasons why this project would qualify: solar, geothermal, stretch energy code, a lot of energy efficiency measures.
Del, do you want to talk about the renderings?
Yeah, I'm worried this might not have the animation after all that. There are physical boards in the back of the room, but we put together a key site plan.
Oh, there it is.
Okay. It may have only captured the last 2. We were diagramming the views from Forest Road to show, we had an image of Street View from Google Earth, like what it looks like today, and then rendered that view with the proposed building using the previous footprint, whereas kind of worst case scenario, if anything, we were actually pulling that building further away from Forest Road. But the diagrams show the contrast of what it looks like now and what the proposed design looks like if it was to be built out. If you slide that one to the top image. the kind of overall aerial downward view. If you just select that image and slide it off to the side, there's images hidden under it. So this is like an aerial view looking down. The image beneath that, or you could just click delete as I talk through them. This image on the right is if you are standing at the crosswalk as you enter the parking lot to the facility, you see a public entrance and the more operational spaces further into the rear of the site. The next image shows the view as if you're standing at the salt shed, looking at the maintenance bays and the wash bay. So all those operational overhead doors are facing south toward the transfer station. The next image is, use your imagination. It's, if you're standing right at Forest Road and you're looking at the east elevation, the rear elevation of the storage garage, what we're trying to get across is that there's no overhead doors on this elevation, so neighbors won't be disrupted by doors going up, headlights coming out, the sound. It's, and even more, there is a buffer of trees. We just made them transparent so you could see the elevation beyond, where it's just a solid wall with no overhead garage doors that will be going up and down.
No windows.
And no windows. And then the next image, these are from two different points, looking southeast and southwest from Forest Road. And with vegetative infill in that buffer area, I like to say the building isn't too in your face. It would be screened by, we were starting to look into arborvitaes, very fast growing, very dense. And then the other view shows the same scenario from the other corner. And you can see a bit of that sound barrier wall, but then you would have the screening of tree vegetation. And again, while you may see like the translucent panel above the garage door, at this level, at this street level, with the sound barrier wall, you're not getting a lot of traffic or sound and headlights with the vegetative buffer and sound barrier wall.
Was there ever a plan to build a berm for noise and visibility reduction? And is that cheaper than a wall, or is there not enough space there for a berm?
It's probably not, it wouldn't be, we wouldn't be able to build the berm tall enough for the large trucks. Their headlights would be higher, yeah. And it's for sound too. So we feel that, like an 8-foot wall would be better than a berm.
I think a berm too would cause the need to cut down trees. So while it may be a good strategy for sound, you'd be cutting down those trees.
Yeah, so the space just isn't there. And we're already saving some trees if we rotate the footprint, correct?
Yes, we are.
Yep.
Yep. And if we rotate and pull the building back, we're maintaining the existing berm. This current scheme, we're kind of getting into it. There's a berm between the existing building and Forest Road, which we're going to be cutting into. And we'll be doing that less if we move the building back. So we're maintaining kind of the current berm that's there.
Apologies on the animation on that one.
And the schedule remains as it was the last time we met. We're about ready to get into the design development, permitting and public outreach phase, starting at the first of the year. We're shooting to get the project before the annual town meeting for final design and construction funding in the spring. If that happens, we'll put together the final construction documents during the summer of 2025 and bid it in the fall of 2025. And the new construction timeline would be reduced from 2 years to 1.5 years with the new approach that we're taking. And any questions?
First off, I like the fact that the garage doors are facing the dump, excuse me, the transfer station, rather than Forest Road. I think that that's really a much better solution, and I think the people on Forest Road will appreciate that. The other thing was, during the dry, dusty season, will you be putting something down to keep the dust down? So it doesn't, I don't know, whether you
During
water it
construction.
or oil it or whatever you do, you know, when you're moving soils back and forth and digging and all that sort of stuff. So it's dry there, so you don't get stuff blowing into the houses on Forest Road.
It'd be something that we'd have to put in the specifications for the contractor to adhere to during construction, but typically that does happen. Yes.
And the other specifications is all the trucks that go out are covered and go directly to Route 2 rather than to, okay. Just
Yep,
check.
we can write those into the specs to
Yeah.
ensure that during construction, all construction traffic comes off Route 2 from Hosmer and
Yeah.
avoids Forest. And then typically there's dust control measures that are put into the specification. Often you'll see a general contractor rent a water truck to spray down the dust and make sure nothing.
Other questions or comments from the committee members? I think maybe at this point, if we roll back to one of your earlier slides when you had your list of potential cost-saving items, and I don't think we need a formal vote on these things because I know you folks are still working the numbers and looking for other opportunities, but I'd like to see what kind of comfort level there is from the rest of the committee that you're on the right track. So if you could, John, if you could bring that slide up, we can just kind of go through it and give folks some guidance. Adam.
Thanks, Dean. I was actually going to ask whether this committee will have the responsibility of going through the estimates and looking at things that, quantities and numbers or values of things that could be reduced to bring costs down. And I was thinking of that based on, in one of the slides, they showed some of the savings by reducing some of the work, and one of the items was skylights. And the amount of savings that was listed was not a small, it was quite a significant.
Well, it should have been 30,000, not 145,000, so.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it made me wonder how many items are in the building list that need to be scrutinized that could say, well, can we get by with 9 of these instead of 13 of these, or whatever the case may be. And so my question to you was, is that something that's the responsibility of this committee to go through, or who's going to go through that?
Well, we've got sort of a smaller group, mostly with with Corey and with Tom, and working directly with PMA and with Weston Sampson, kind of getting into that level of detail. And they've been meeting pretty much on a weekly basis to develop what they've come up with so far. So I certainly, if anybody's got any, as you look through these documents, if anybody has any ideas that jump out at you, we certainly want to take advantage of your expertise. One of the purposes behind having PMA as the owner's project manager is they're not the architects, and they're the guys that do a lot of the scrutinizing to the level that you suggest. But, I'm not discounting it, but I think I'd prefer to put the onus of it on PMA because we're paying those guys anyway.
Well, I like what you described as the process of them going with the DPW on that, because ultimately it's the DPW who the equipment serves, and the skylights and all the other items, and if 9 isn't enough, then the correct number needs to be achieved, and I don't suppose that we could decide that.
Yeah, Corey, I know in the meetings you've been having, it's with PMA and Weston Sampson, it's not only you, but also, I believe, the town engineer and what used to be called the highway superintendent?
Yeah, we've had the operations super and the assistant super in on those conversations with the town engineer. When we've gotten to the level of detail related to equipment, we've brought in the head mechanic and with the expertise in those levels to see what things we can sort of defer or what kind of things are, like, say, a necessity, but to make things function efficiently. So we've been going through those exercises to kind of try to fine tune without being detrimental to the operations.
Sound good?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I don't know about the rest of my colleagues here, but I can't read any of that. There we go, that's a little better.
Okay.
So I think, I'll just kind of scroll through these. The first one is eliminating the phase construction and being able to move the building away from Forest Road. Any reaction from my colleagues? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Is that something?
That's fantastic. When I went through the plans, I kept on coming back to the phasing thing and the costs for the phasing. And if we can eliminate that and cut down on the number of years, I don't know what the savings will be, but I was hoping it would be more than you've got written there. But
And it was one of the items that FinCom rightly jumped on that one right from the beginning. So I'm glad we're responsive to that, in addition to just, it makes sense. Next item, finalize number of geothermal wells. John, could you explain to us a little bit, I know you've reflected you're going to be able to reduce them by 25%. What process do you have to follow in order to firm up that number? Is there some kind of a testing procedure, or where do we go from here on that?
So we have to get the test well drilled and then find the capacity of the ground source in terms of the BTUs it can supply. And then we build in some redundancy for, we have the requirement, say it's 50,000. We want to build in some redundancy. So we don't want to just meet that exact demand. We want to have additional wells in case something happens to one or more of them over time. But right now, it was a guess, and it was kind of based on another project that we were working on at the same time. When they got their final results, they were able to reduce their number of wells considerably. But we haven't made that decision yet.
So at what point does that test well get drilled, and at what point do you think you might be able to firm up that number?
Probably in the next month to 6 weeks. We're about to get someone on board to come out here, and we need to schedule them to come out here after the new year. It shouldn't be an issue with the weather. They can get down to 400, 500 feet. So they don't have to wait. Not that there's an issue with freezing at the moment, but they shouldn't be deterred by the weather.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Yes.
Can you, again, since we don't have a final number, I understand that this may have ways to go, but can we understand, are there break-even points in terms of having the geothermal wells will save us X dollars over Y years, therefore, although there's an expense of putting them in, there's a savings. Is there a trade-off there? Because one of the questions we're bound to encounter between now and town meeting is, why are we doing it at all?
One of the reasons is it's mandated in Acton, but we can't use fossil fuels. The other option would be air source heat pumps, which are not ideal for large volume spaces that we have. Geothermal is the most efficient, but it's also the most expensive upfront to install. But there is a break-even point, and we can provide that. I don't have it tonight.
It'll be useful, because telling people, sorry, that horse is out of the barn rarely wins votes.
We recently met with the town of Needham. They're in a similar situation, and we worked on a life cycle cost analysis for ground source versus air source. And while upfront air source is cheaper, it's definitely the more efficient. And over the lifespan of a 50-plus year building, the numbers were in favor of ground source, especially when you factor in those incentives with the Mass Save program through Eversource. So we can work on that and put some of those numbers.
You're going to need every piece of evidence and data that you can muster.
The schools have done it, and so they presented it. So we do have some backup already, and the schools have 4 more. The North Acton Fire Station has them as well. I'm just hoping that we can cut down on the number,
Yeah.
but that's not determined yet, so.
I think, we touched on this a couple of times in the past, we're kind of forced into either air source or ground source HVAC systems because of the fact that the town meeting overwhelmingly approved those changes to all of our energy codes. These things were discussed, and I think folks that were reflecting on this, either from the private sector or the public sector, did warn folks that, the initial cost is going to be higher on these things. But now it's the law, so, at one point during the first energy crisis in that particular building, we actually moved a wood stove into the office area, which I'm not sure whether you can do that nowadays or not, but it was great if you were close to it, but not so great if you weren't. Yes.
I totally understand. I just know that the school committee, for example, is being asked to reconsider things that this town has done for 40 years. So all I'm saying is that yes, I do know this, but, whether it's 47 million or 40 million or whatever, this is going to be a very steep hill to climb. And every element will be scrutinized, analyzed, and if we only could pass an override by 45 votes this past year, boy, it's going to be touch and go next year.
So with that reality slap, I'd just like to, get a consensus from my colleagues here. Do you think we should continue to investigate a reduction in the number of geothermal wells as we move forward?
Definitely.
Yes, no? Okay. Next item, reduce the extent of the masonry base. This was something that I specifically asked Mr. Camo about earlier in the week because I was a little bit unclear what was included in the masonry base. I was very concerned to make sure that the building would maintain its integrity in case of a vehicle strike, particularly from the inside of the building, which I've been reassured there'll still be a good solid wall inside the building. But John, if you want to talk us through exactly where this deleted masonry base is going to be taken away from.
Right, mainly around the vehicle storage garage on the side that's facing Forest Road. No traffic there. Planted areas, The interior wall is concrete, and it goes up to about 3.5 feet, and that protects the wall from plow strikes. On the other side of the building, where all the maintenance overhead doors are, lots of traffic will have the masonry base on the exterior of the building. And it's also decorative around the administrative offices.
Just to ask the question more pointedly, is the exterior masonry base strictly decorative, or is it also
No,
functional?
no, it provides durability at the base of the building because it's a metal wall panel. When the wall panel is low, it's susceptible to kind of rusting. It's susceptible to denting and damage.
Okay, reaction from my colleagues about that particular item?
I'm not really sure I completely understand. You're not, on the Forest Road side, you're not going to have a masonry area at all. So the rusting that you mentioned, it will be,
We use an
Open.
alternate system there. It's a concrete-faced insulation board.
oh,
The other reason for the masonry base is the buildings by energy code are required to insulate the perimeter of the slab on grade around the
Yeah.
building. So we have to bring insulation down below grade on the exterior face of the building. And then that masonry sandwiches that between the concrete. But it can also be a different material called concrete-faced insulation board, which is durable. It's about a 3/8 inch thick concrete over rigid insulation, and that's applied to the foundation and the slab perimeter, and that provides durability. So it wouldn't be metal panel going down to the ground we'd keep it off about 12 inches.
okay, so you would still have the durability.
Yes,
That you-
and mainly like to protect from
right.
weed whackers and lawnmowers and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Okay. Going for it. After understanding. I'm sorry.
Okay. So I think everyone seems good with you continuing to pursue that. Provide HMA at knockdown in lieu of cast-in-place concrete. Yeah, a little explanation of that would be helpful.
It's just a concrete slab is far more durable, especially with heavy vehicles, but for cost savings, we could substitute heavy-duty asphalt pavement section there.
So is this going to be inside the building or is this outside? the building?
Exterior, outside the building.
Outside the building?
Adjacent to the wash bay.
Okay.
So it's not, I don't think it's I don't think it's worth the savings, but it's identified as a potential savings.
So for members of committee that aren't familiar with a knockdown pad, that's the area outside of the wash bay where the DPW can use a high-powered hose to kind of knock off all the heavier debris off the truck before bringing it into the wash bay to have a final wash. So that way all that larger sediment doesn't get clogged into the drainage system. So that's what a knockdown pad is.
I'm not a construction expert, but I would agree with his opinion that it's not worth the $25,000 in savings because you're going to be repaving it with asphalt at a cost of $25,000 every 8 years anyway.
Corey, you're our paving guy.
Yeah, it's one of those trade-offs. I mean, we can do paving in-house, so it's something that we wouldn't have to necessarily hire every time if there was issues. Sometimes I find pavement's a little more forgiving where it's not as rigid as concrete. So if the ground settles and there's cracks, a lot of times the paving can kind of do some adjustment with that where concrete can't. You'll see. Not even that, if it's just, say there's a settlement issue or a rock or something and it shifts, you'll get a crack in the pavement and a lip where sometimes in the warmer weather, pavement gets a little pliable and it can kind of move with it. If you kind of look at going to the transfer station, you see these really odd humps. It's as the trash underneath is settling and it's moving, but because it's in the sun, the pavement's kind of moving with it, where concrete is just kind of a rigid structure where it would just sort of where you see some of the sidewalks, you'll see the concrete at the joints move.
I guess my question is, does it impede your operations?
No, because either scenario, it gives us an area that's impervious so that we can get the corrosive materials off the truck without it getting into the ground. So it helps us to give us a space to do that kind of stuff, contain what's being knocked off the truck so we can clean that up and remove it. So whether it's concrete or asphalt, we're still getting an area that keeps us functional, so.
Okay.
I very much value Corey's opinion on that. So do you think it is worth pursuing the $25,000 in savings versus concrete pad?
I think so. I mean, when we look at a town road, say we theoretically look at a road having say a 25-year lifespan. That being said, on a busy road like Main Street, it's going to have a much shorter lifespan with the abuse it takes, where on a side street, you'll get the 30 plus. So here, where you're parking vehicles to clean off, it's not getting that constant rumbling of cars going over it. So I think it would have a reasonably good lifespan to work and suit our needs, yeah.
I like his opinion better than mine.
Yeah.
Me too.
It's ever more expert.
Okay, I guess move ahead and continue considering that. Reduce extent of mezzanine area by 10%. I know there has been discussion about some of that mezzanine area being used for storage, not only by DPW, but by other departments. I'll kick this one to Tom. Have you had discussions about everybody else is trying to get a little piece of the sandbox?
Yeah, I'll look to Corey for a little bit more information too, but from what I understand, this area would be for excess storage from not only DPW, but other departments throughout the town. And this reduction, and Corey, please correct me if I'm wrong, it won't greatly reduce our ability to be able to accommodate not only DPW storage needs, but a portion of the town departments. And if I'm completely misremembering that, please correct me.
No, I know we've had sort of multiple conversations on this. It's one of those things that's always hard to get square footage back. I know we talked some scenarios where it's possible that we could reduce the mezzanine space in areas that we could phase it in later. I don't know that with a 10% number of, I forget how the conversation went on that, but it's one of those areas that's kind of a cheap space to build. I know the various departments, recreation, cemetery, facilities, a lot of people everyone's kind of maxed out looking for space. So these are the nice spaces that people can use, as well as the mechanics and our own crews for, sometimes if we have seasonal equipment or something like that, we can put it on the mezzanine space. It's sort of out of the way, but still easily accessible. So, but I know we have, in this design, we had a mezzanine space along the vehicle storage. We had some in the work areas, as well as a small area in the mechanic space. So it seemed like something that we could make some reductions without causing anything too detrimental to the program itself. And I know we were to look at a way, if there was a way to possibly do it where we could maybe add it back later if we had to. So it was, but something we have to explore more to see if that was reasonable or not.
Look, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would recommend going that route. Otherwise, what's going to happen is the DPW is going to end up taking the arrows in the back that the other departments might want to have extra storage. And I don't think you need to be that target. You don't have to paint it that brightly. So go for the space that you need. Let them fight their fight based on their merits at some other point.
excess book storage, Ann?
Well, we'd like the library back, but we won't get that. Going through the area now, it looked to me like the mezzanine was jam-packed full and you could barely move around. Was that just my looking at something that I didn't understand, or isn't it jam-packed full?
No, it absolutely, right now, we're bursting at the seams everywhere. That's why
Yeah.
you see convex trailers outside. Obviously, this building is quite a bit larger, so it's gaining us that space, and we've been thinning out stuff as we've been going through various operations. We've done quite a bit of clean out as far as, just like being at home, you collect stuff you don't really need and realize you don't use it. So we've been thinning that out. But yeah, I mean, our building now, due to the small size of it, we've been busting out everywhere we look, so.
I'm going to say this, and I know that the Finance Committee doesn't like my saying this. I think you should build things for the future, not necessarily for the Recreation Department nor for any other department, but you're going to need other kinds of stuff in the future that you're going to want to put up on the mezzanine thing. So I'm not sure that cutting it just by 10% is a valid reduction, but
I can speak for the Finance Committee because we actually addressed this on Tuesday night. And one of the things that I think we're trying to do, there was a proposal to put a fire safety officer in a different revolving fund. And it was like, don't confuse the town. If this is space that you need for the future at the DPW, make that case, great. But if there's space in there for friends or other departments, boy, I'd like to see it in their line item.
my point is that I think that they will need it.
Then they should make that case during budget discussions. If they need it, then they should make that case during their budget discussions. This is the problem. If it isn't transparent, if this department's budget is actually being covered somewhere else, it's hard to then hold things accountable. It's hard to then explain them to town meeting.
I can understand that, but I just think that I don't want them to underbuild, but I don't want them to overbuild. I want them to build so that they have some leeway in which they can get, when they need more stuff, I don't know what the stuff is that they will be needing, but they will definitely need new and different kinds of stuff, that they have a space to put it in. So I would keep it and let it be just for the DPW.
Corey, we're going to be going through this a number of times, so I think maybe give this a little more pondering and bring it back. And if we don't have a time to bring it back to the full committee, I think if you bring it back to me and the manager's department, I think I've got a sense of the feelings of committee and can say yay or nay. When I first moved into that building with the tree department, they gave me a 12-by-6 workshop. Like they said, you had to step outside in order to change your mind. So, yeah, I'm acutely aware of not having adequate space. Let's move down to the last one. David.
Mr. Chair, I was just wondering when you wanted comments from the public on various line items. Do you want to save them all to the end? Do you want us to step up when you're discussing a particular line item?
I think we'll probably, after the committee's had a chance to go through this, I think we'll ask for public comments.
Thank you.
Thanks. All All right, I think the last item here is, on this part of the list, skylights. Kind of talk us through that. What was the analysis you went through to determine how many skylights you were going to put in the first iteration, and why are we cutting them back?
So skylights are in the vehicle storage garage. We're not showing any, we usually include clear story translucent wall panels up high to bring light into that space. It's about 100 feet wide, 200 feet long. There's an area, at least one part of the elevation above where the admin building is, where we do have those translucent panels. And we also have them on the two sides of the building that have the doors. But that doesn't cover the entire floor print of the garage with natural light, which saves on electricity. So the skylights are interspaced between the areas that are designed to support solar panels. And they just bring in natural light from above to save a little bit on electrical cost. We have 18, we said reduce them by half. We still get the benefit, not as much.
Reactions?
I would just be curious what the net present value of having fewer skylights and more electricity later is versus the opposite, having more skylights and less
Yeah,
electricity later.
and the vehicle storage garage isn't high-intensity lighting space because there's not a lot of work going on there that requires foot candles down at the work surface. So it's, there is some savings. I don't know what that is, but we probably could come up with some numbers on that.
I can ask a sort of anecdotal question to Corey, which is regardless of how many skylights there are the lights ever going to be turned off? Probably not.
I know, at least in the existing building, the lighting that we have in there is motion activated, so they turn
Yes,
on, and then
that's
after a certain
required.
time, they turn off automatically. So we don't have to remember when you leave to hit the switch, so, yeah.
Anybody have any strong feelings one way or another about that potential reduction?
Sounds like a good reduction to me.
Okay. So now, potential work to be done by town forces. I mean, that I'm a big advocate of having work done by our own folks that are on salary anyway, but obviously, if they're working on this site, they're not building sidewalks and paving roads and that sort of thing. So these kind of changes might make a lot of sense to the committee because we're trying to save money on the building, but it is going to have some impact for a year or so on the larger town operations. Anybody have any reactions on that? And more importantly, Corey, do you feel comfortable with this suite of possibilities here?
Yeah, like you said, I mean, all these items are definitely within the wheelhouse of the crews. They're capable, I mean, and the other benefit is like you say, if we're working here, we're not somewhere else, but in the same situation, we're able to sort of stagger the work. So if we say we started some of the landscaping or site clearing, we can do it in between jobs, or if there's some downtime, we can do that, and then we can walk away, do whatever we need to do out around town, and then come back. So we can kind of piece it in over a little bit of time, which helps not just say takes us away for a couple weeks and we're not doing anything else but that. So we can stagger it without having any kind of a time constraint that we have to be out of the road or things like that. So, but yeah, anything that we're doing here takes a member away from doing something else. We have to be cognizant, but I think it's definitely doable for what we have. Yeah.
Well, Corey, I'll look to you and our associate from PMA. What's the prevailing wage for a private contractor that would be doing this kind of work? You know, you have to get the wage sheets from time to time.
I can actually look that up if you give me 1 second.
And then we can compare it with what it costs our people.
Yeah, I was even going to suggest compare it to what it costs if we have to do it using overtime for our people. And if it's still cheaper to do it using overtime, it seems like a slam dunk.
The numbers are being crunched as we speak.
It seems to me that 19 and 20 have a time date on them because it's pre-construction.
That's right.
So that those are definitely have to be done within a certain time. Whereas 17 and 18, which is landscaping after construction, can be a hit or miss thing, you know, on rainy days or sunny days or something like that. But the 19, the things that are done before construction, I should think it would have to be done within a certain period.
Yeah, it would have a definite deadline we have to get out of the way. But if as we're working towards that, we know construction is going to be, say, starting in early 2026, or whenever the timeline is, we could start doing something now, or not now, but as things get approved after town meeting. And I think as they talk about the rough site excavation, it's 20%, so it's not a big amount of work. So it's just sort of the first piece to kind of clear and rub the area, so.
So prevailing wage for a laborer who would typically do landscaping, the most recent package I saw, $79.46 an hour for one laborer. For an asphalt paving raker, just had it right here. It is sorry, the PDF doesn't want to cooperate with me when I need the answer. An asphalt raker, highway or residential, is $73.21 an hour.
Adam?
Do the prevailing wages that are quoted there, are they intended to include taxes, benefits, and overhead, or fringe?
They include fringe benefits. I believe it's health and I forget there's one more item to it.
Okay.
And it's based, of course, off the current union packages. So prevailing wage right now in this area, that schedule is from a neighboring area. So that's kind of what you would look at for a rate right now for just those trades.
Corey, do you know the average FTE cost of your departmental workers?
I know our sort of labor positions aren't making $80 an hour. That's a.
Yeah, but then you probably
I don't
have
have
to divide by about 35 to 40% to come up with the same
Yeah. I would-
fringe.
I don't want to, I was going to speculate 25 an hour, but I don't know exactly the number if it's.
So if it was 30 and you divide it by, say, 0.4 is 75.
Mr. Chair, I would actually add to what you're calculating, Adam, and I was also say that the costs that we're not talking about that we would be saving by taking this in-house are workers' comp insurance bond payments that the contractor would be carrying for this added expense to their overall bid, their overhead and profit that they would charge on top of this labor as well. So the cost savings isn't just in the salary difference between the prevailing wage and what we would pay departmental staff to undertake this over overtime or straight time. It's also a lot more on top of it. So the savings is a little bit bigger than we're speculating right now.
And my calculation shows that your cost is already lower than the prevailing wage, which you probably already knew. My calculator just proved it.
I approve his calculator.
Typically also for paving, town public works departments tend to get better rates on the asphalt from the DOT versus what you would get from the general contractor with all their markups and everything. So that's something else to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think we'll move ahead, planning on some of those items being done in-house. The block walls and covered storage for DPW materials. Corey?
And this is related to all the storage bins we have for stone, gravel, things like that, which we have the blocks now that we're using. We have some blocks that we have from other projects. So this is something that we have materials in stock that we can easily use for this and set it up the way it would, as we get comfortable in the new arrangement, set it up and how it would work best.
Seems pretty straightforward to me. Okay, we'll proceed with that. The bid alternates. Certainly, if anybody wishes to, or John, if you want to speak to any of these, I don't know if this is the proper time to start thinking about these bid alternates, or is this something, a discussion you might have when we get a little bit further down the road?
It's a good time to start thinking about them. As we develop the drawings, we want to clearly delineate what's a base bid and bid alternate item. Doesn't have to be today. We could talk quickly about each one of these. The bridge cranes, we want to pick bid alternates that really are, make sense in terms of having the town purchase them later if they aren't accepted at the time of the bid. The bridge cranes, there are 3 bridge cranes in the shop areas. They're 5-ton bridge cranes. We could design the structure to support those, and they could be purchased and installed at a later date. The canopy addition at the salt shed could be contracted out to, as a small project later. But this is mirroring the canopy that's already built on one side of the shed on the other, and just provides some more cover for equipment that doesn't need to be stored in the garage. Sound barrier walls. This one, I think, is maybe a little bit iffy because we really do, I think, want to have sound barrier walls as part of the project to protect the neighbors. So I'm not sure if this one actually, in further kind of review, makes sense to put as a bid alternate. What I think we can do is reduce the scope or come up with a less expensive sound barrier wall to include in the project that performs as well, but brings the cost down from what we're seeing here. The last one is fit out of the wash bay, finishes and equipment. The wash bay is designed to be corrosion resistant because it's a very corrosive environment when you're spraying trucks and aerosolizing salt. It gets everywhere. So we have plastic wall panels, we have galvanized steel. That would not be a bid alternate. We would have galvanized steel. You could fit out the space later. It's one of the more expensive spaces in the building to on a square foot basis, and purchase the wash bay equipment, install that later. It's an idea, and I think we need to consider that, but we need to talk with the DPW more, I think, before we make a decision on it.
The one thought that I've got about the wash bay is there has been some interest by some entities about, historically there's been perhaps runoff of sodium and de-icing materials off the site, impact on stream flow downstream, and fish populations. So if we defer having an operational wash bay, is that going to have any environmental impact? I think, Corey, you might want to think about that?
Yeah, I think this one could go a little more thought, because I think having an appropriate space indoors that we can wash, whether or not that means we get, say we get an empty wash bay that we can use a smaller pressure washer or something and phase in more appropriately sized equipment later, but I think having that indoor space, right now, I'd say over the last probably 10 years, we brought the washing in-house, so it's in the vehicle storage, but it's not appropriate, so we're spraying the salt and all the corrosive materials elsewhere in the building on the parked vehicles that are parked there, the structure itself, so I think exploring this one to see what we can omit, but still have a functional indoor wash bay would be good.
Okay, thank you. Reaction from other members?
Does this have a tight tank?
Yes.
Dean, I've got a comment on that.
Yes.
I'd be concerned about deferring that under the risk that when the project is complete, if the town doesn't have $300,000 to $500,000 to finish fitting that out, it could be a year, 2 years, 3 years before that gets properly fit out. And $500,000, as we know from the ALG process, can make or break a budget in any given year. I'd probably be more inclined to finish some of these items earlier than later, but I realize this is something that we can discuss all the way up until town meeting.
Thank you. All right, before I let you run away, John and crew, let's open it up to see if there's any comments from the public that might want to react to the discussions had so far.
Hi, I'm David Martin. I live on High Street. I'm also on the Select Board. Thank you. This is a great list. I'm in favor of almost everything on this list for value engineering. I did have a question about what was the difference between direct cost and estimated value?
That's with markups, so that includes markups. So there's the line item in the estimate is just the direct cost is prior to overhead, profit, and so forth, general conditions.
I understand, thank you. Almost everything on the list where we can make changes after the fact and accommodate them, I think is fine to defer out of the building. The things that are inherent in the building itself, I think we should choose to do up front because they're difficult to do later. I think there isn't an issue of the structure to support the cranes, right? The structure should be there. I mean, adding that structure back to the building later. To Adam's point about the wash bay, that's probably it's probably less expensive to do up front. And also, I would put under that category the mezzanine space, right? You can't get that square footage back. There's no way we could add the mezzanine after the fact very easily. If we could do it, it would be really expensive. And there's lots of reasons, I think, to do that. We want a building that adapts to the future. We don't know how that space is going to be used decades out. We also have a couple of older buildings in town that we could declare as surplus in a decade or half a decade, and those small buildings have stuff in them that we need to move someplace, and I think we should have a place for that kind of thing. I also then have a couple of questions on the heating system that are related to the items. Do we know the BTU requirements of the building itself, the heat load of the building itself? Because you mentioned 50,000 BTUs, but that doesn't ring right for me.
50 ton, I believe it is, for
50
heating.
tons. So that's for everybody, that's 50 times 12,000 BTUs an hour. Okay, that makes much more sense to me. And then how is the equipment bay going to be heated? Is it going to be heated with radiant flooring?
There's radiant flooring in the mechanics bays, and The equipment? You mean like the vehicle storage would have minimal conditioning?
Yeah, but I understand it's minimal. Do you know how, though, it's being heated? Well, I don't know what, you tell me what you're storing the equipment at. So if you're storing the equipment at 50 degrees, for example.
Oh, I see.
How
Yeah.
how are you heating that space to 50 degrees? Does that also have radiant flooring? Or
No, it does not.
What kind of system does it have?
It's part of the geothermal ground pump heat system.
So, sorry, how does the air in that equipment bay get heated from that, right? Is there air exchangers in the,
There would be, yes.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Sir, please come forward.
Right there, okay. Peter Chadzinski, 10 Robinwood Road. I'm a user of a transfer station and concerned about the traffic to and out of transfer station, especially in the after hours when they close the Route 2 exit, and then how will the traffic be directed? And my question is really loaded because access to the transfer station from Route 2 is very dangerous, as you all know, probably. So my hope was that there would actually be access to the transfer station from Forest Street and then exit down to Route 2 instead of from Route 2. I may be talking out of place here because you're talking about the building, but the building is connected to the transfer station invariably, inherently. So should I explain the dangers of Route 2 entering transfer station, or is that understood?
So one of the things we did in our previous committee when we talked about feasibility of the project, originally we came up with the idea of looking at both the new building and the transfer station. And that committee decided, and it was confirmed by the select board, that we'd basically split the projects. We know that eventually something different is going to have to be done in the transfer station, but we've specifically uncoupled this building from discussion about the transfer station. There's been speculation in the past that people might or might not agree with, like, do we eliminate the transfer station and long-term look at curbside pickup universal throughout the town? And the pluses and minuses that, for instance. There's been lots of other discussions, and I know Corey has been working on, some of the improvements. I believe there's also been some discussion in the past about creating some kind of a better slip lane for traffic from Hosmer Street into the transfer station without having to, that heart-stopping moment when you pull out into traffic and then have to hit the brakes in order to turn back in again, so.
And then face all the trucks that go over the hill.
Yeah.
And don't see you.
Yes, it's quite a problem, and I think it's something that's going to be worked on, but probably not specifically in conjunction with this project. I know there's already been concern expressed by members of the public trying to eliminate as much in the way of residential traffic on Forest Road anyway. So I think opening up an entrance from Forest Road directly into the transfer station, frankly, is not in the cards,
But
in my opinion, but
if I may, all that traffic that goes down Forest Road anyways.
it does.
So in fact, it will cut down on that traffic because that section from the entrance to the transfer station, to the DPW, whatever, and then the Route 2, that would be eliminated if entrance was, because all the traffic, I'm a frequent visitor to the transfer station, probably more than once a week, and everybody, goes on Taylor Road, makes a right turn, Forest Road, and then through 2. So that would be shorter, in fact, through the neighborhoods by quarter mile maybe, but still. Okay, I think this belongs in the same realm as the storage space, you know, take advantage of the building, the fact that it is being built, and solve another problem while at it. The decoupling, in my view, was a wrong decision. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And please feel free to reach out to the manager's office or me personally or Corey to continue the discussion. It's something that's got to be discussed and is going to be worked on, but not in this process. Thank you. Greg.
Yeah, since I guess it's my job to be Mr. Debbie Downer or whoever, one of the things that I believe we need to talk about, think about, plan on, get the numbers for, is things go bump in the night. And whether it's state revenue shortfalls, whether it's federal government budget cuts, whether it's tariffs putting the economy on a tailspin, who knows what's going to happen between now and town meeting. So one of the numbers that I would like to have us think about is what's the cost of this not happening in 2025? What happens if this gets put on a shelf for a year, 2 years, 3 years, for the entire Trump administration? And if we have to bring this back a year from now, 4 years from now, whatever, what's the cost? Because what we're going to be proposing here is going to be a hard pill to swallow. And people are going to want to know, if I vote no, whether it's at a override vote or whether it's at town meeting or wherever, you know, what is the impact?
Thank you. Yeah, well, the prices haven't come down in any year. Briefly in 2020, post-pandemic, that's it. They've gone up every year
I think
since.
the only year they ever came down was in 1929. And I don't think we want those
No.
kind of prices going down again.
Tom.
Thank you. John, could you explain to us what the typical construction escalation is percentage-wise year to year, or what the estimate could be?
Used to be 4 or 5%. It's fluctuated since COVID. We've seen 14, 15% for a couple of years.
Okay.
Seems to be settling back down. This year, we've got some pretty good bid results on a number of projects. I don't know if we can use that as moving forward, but this past year, we actually did see a bit of a downturn in prices, a few percentage points from last year. But those are very high prices that we've been seeing since 2020. What I've heard is 50% since 2018
Okay,
increase. Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
May I answer? Debbie Downer? This is a project that's already been put off. They're working in really grotty conditions. If the teachers had to work in these conditions, we wouldn't have any teachers. The schools want to build a new school. I think it's time for us to do a DPW building, even though it's going to have to be an override. I think that we are working hard at cutting costs as much as possible. And the fact that it's going to happen within a year and a half instead of 2 to 3 years is a big plus in the favor of the project. And I think that building a building that will help, will be satisfactory for the future, which we know we will need more space, when we have built schools for a declining population, I think you're going to have to talk to your FinCom members about that kind of trade-off. And I think that It's this time because the escalation costs are unknown. And I think that we should go forward. I really do.
Thank you. Adam?
Yeah, I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about the contingencies, and I'm asking specifically because under E, under other cost potentials, it looks like we're talking about reducing the contingency from 10% to 8%.
That's the estimating contingency? Yeah, so at the schematic design level, there's a lot of unknowns. And as the design develops and we know more about the project, and we're working obviously towards cost savings, that contingency can go down. And so we're, anticipating that there'll be some savings as we progress through the design to the next level.
Okay, great. I think I was misunderstanding that we were reducing the amount that we were budgeting for
No,
in the
that's
contingency.
just the estimator safety factor.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you. One other question that you can answer for me, which is in regard to contingencies. Whatever amount we've budgeted for contingencies, what happens if costs go above those? Are those covered by insurances, or how does that work?
No. I mean, we have a 6% construction contingency included. Our project's 3%, 2 to 3% typically. There are sometimes unknown. Our job is to uncover anything that's unknown. If we have impacted soils, we want to, make sure that that's accounted for. But that's typically what that would cover. But no, we don't ever want to exceed that contingency, or else the town will have to find more money. And it's not a pretty situation, so.
I think back specifically to our visit up in Westford and how their costs ballooned, but I think they had some sort of cost mitigation in the contract, which saved the town and bankrupted a number of contractors. This is maybe a question more for the town and the select board. But
Yeah.
how do we protect ourselves if the price of steel suddenly triples overnight?
I can speak to that a little bit. When this will go out to bid, when the bid's received, there'll be and they find a responsive bidder, if it looks like we have enough money, sign the contract with the responsive bidder, they have to post a performance bond for the project. This is what happened in that project in Westford, was that the contractor was not able to perform, and I think some of the work was done by an insurance, the insurance company seized the bond, and they had to hire somebody else to complete the project. The important thing for us is once there is a bid received and properly documented and properly bonded, then if steel costs go through the roof, it's not our problem. We had the same sort of thing when I was doing the public safety building 20 years ago. Electrical contractor did not buy up all the copper, and price of copper went through the roof, and electrical contractor went broke. It happens, but the concern that I would have is between now and the time that, we have this out to bid, if suddenly prices spike and it goes beyond what we've projected as far as a contingency, once the bid's awarded and we've got a performance bond on it, I might feel bad for the contractor from a humanitarian point of view, but as a town official, I don't have quite as much sympathy.
Thank you.
So that gives us a nice segue. I think we've touched on quite a bit, discussed design progress. Is there anything that you, John, and your team would like to present to us for information or any feedback for any of the design decisions that have come through at this point?
No, Dean, I think we've been updating on a weekly basis with Corey and the DPW and the small town group, and then on a bi-weekly basis with a larger town group that we meet with and give updates to. But we are continuing to develop the design. We're going to take, if it's been approved that the phasing is out, we're going to then go back and revise our site plans and call that the end of schematic design, and then move forward to the next level, which is design development.
Okay, Tom?
Mr. Chair, there's one person online with their hand raised.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Let them in. You got a question?
Eric, you should be able to unmute.
Okay. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Eric, E-R-I-K, Heels, H-E-E-L-S, 17 Forest Road. I have a short prepared statement to read. I have 2 points to make. First, I ask that these DPW meetings be scheduled on a rotating weekday basis rather than always on Thursday nights. I will be making the same request to the Acton Select Board, to the Transportation Advisory Committee, and to other relevant committees. Thursday night is choir practice for me, and I should not have to choose between being an active member of the town of Acton and an active member of Acton Congregational Church. Any town of Acton committee that meets on a fixed day necessarily excludes anyone with a conflict on that day. Second, as an FYI, I sent a direct mail piece at my own personal expense on December 1st, 2024 to 1,506 addresses in and around Acton's Robbins Park neighborhood, advocating for the construction of sidewalks on Forest Road for the safety of people and pets in conjunction with the proposed DPW building project. I am glad to provide a copy of this mailer to this committee if you have not already received one. Thank you, Eric, E-R-I-K, Heels, H-E-E-L-S, 17 Forest Road, Actonian since 1995.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comment. All right. Update on community conversations. I think one of the things that we've discussed a number of times is the need to get a meeting together or a tour on site of the building on a weekend. I think, January, obviously December is come and gone just about. January timeframe for a 4-hour time slot on a Saturday. That's something that we can work out with you, Corey?
Yeah, that would work. The only caveat would be if the storm comes up on a Saturday. But yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, we may want to document that just so we can show.
Yeah. So, Corey, maybe if you can discuss that with me and with the town manager, and we can come up with a date for sometime mid-January. And then at that point, if this committee has not met, we'll certainly reach out and let everybody know when that date's going to be. And we'll facilitate that and be able to get it out on social media, get as many people invited there. I think we did do some tours of the building a couple of years ago, and it hasn't gotten any better. So I think it's be a worthwhile discussion. I suspect that there would be no need for the design team to be there, but the boards and whatever audiovisual materials you guys might have up to date at that point would be great. We can put it on some boards and we can kind of talk people through it. And I think we should be able to do it without interfering with your weekends.
Yeah, we'd be happy to provide those boards.
Yeah, okay.
Can they be interactive?
Actually, yes, there are some technologies where you can scan a QR code with your phone and kind of, as if you're in that space, like with a pinpoint, and as if you're
I
in a
suspected you
mechanic's
could do
bay.
that.
Mm-hmm, pretty cool.
Adam?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment that I'll try to remember to make every time we meet, which is, it might be wise to do the same type of open house on a date after the warrant has come out, and maybe even have the invitation and details of that date in the warrant. I think that would be a really great way for people who do read their warrant and do care to get the information to come and visit the site.
Great, thank you.
We could also put your posters in the library lobby. And if you have a QR code that makes it pop around, that would be fantastic.
I've got I'll be doing a presentation on January 30th at the Council on Aging in the afternoon. I've also got another one in early February with the Acton Lions Club. And I think as we develop this a little bit more, we'll probably be reaching out specifically to present to, I'm thinking Conservation, Design Review Board. When you folks have kind of moved to the next phase of your site plan, I think that's probably the proper time to run into Conscom and talk to them.
Yep.
And, you know, now that we've been able to pull the building back a bit, I think probably in the late January, early February timeframe might be a good time to see what fits into your schedule and set some times up to do that. Also, Design Review Board. I don't know of any other particular boards and committees that would be involved. I'm sure you're going to be in front of FinCom before this is all over, once again.
Okay.
And if anybody has any other groups, whether it be neighborhood groups or, you know, social organizations, and they're looking for a speaker, why, I'd be happy to go out and, you know, have a lot of coffees and conversations with folks. So certainly let me know. We want to get this spread out as much as possible. And that kind of covers the public education. Administrative updates. Date of next updated select board meeting, that's going to be Monday night. And now that the committee here has endorsed pretty much everything that you've suggested, I will bring that to the select board on Monday night and let them know. So that will be handled. Then I guess the next item of business is next meeting date for this committee. And, you know, when do you think, John, that you want to come back and run anything else by us? Is there any important milestones that you want to be able to visit?
I guess the most important milestone would be to complete the schematic design now that we know we're not phasing the project, so we can update those documents based on that approach. The building doesn't really change. It's just moving to a different location. So I'd say towards the end of January, middle or end of January, next couple of weeks, we have a skeleton crew with vacations and holidays.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I could have Tom circulate a few potential dates around that we don't have conflicts with. January, at least for the select board, and certainly FinCom, gets crazy with budget sessions. So unless anybody has any specific brainstorms, why don't we circulate a few dates around early next week, the potential dates?
I'd throw January 28th on the board at the moment, which is a Tuesday, which would address the public concern of having it on a different night. It doesn't conflict with the Finance Committee.
That would be a problem for me, but I would be happy to I'm going to be I've got some presentations for the Community Preservation Committee on that night, but certainly we could have other people run this meeting. Tom?
Would the following date, the 30th? Well, I'm sorry, the 29th work a little bit better? Works for me. I know it's a bit of a busy 3 weeks there for the Select Board and Finance Committees.
Yeah, Wednesday, the 29th? Okay, why don't we do Wednesday, the 29th, in this room? We'll be in touch with you folks and see if you need to come back out for that, or how we're going to handle it.
Yes, thank
The
you.
committee will meet on the 29th. That's on the 30th, and that is 1 PM. Great. Let's see, January. Okay. At this point, unless somebody has anything else they'd like to talk about, I'd be willing to entertain a motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. I don't think that's debatable. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you.